Hello and welcome to the Kambi Festival of Sportsbook. I'm Tim Poole, editor of Gambling Insider, and I'm here to kick off a week full of insight and analysis as we talk about all things sports betting. Our panel starts off with Zeno Ossko, CEO of BetWarrior, Paul Burns, CEO of the Canadian Gaming Association, and Christian Polsäter, Director of Sports at LeoVegas. But throughout the week, you can expect plenty more from Kambi, including keynote presentations from CEO Christian Nyland, topics such as esports and sports betting integrity. For the next hour or so, stay with us as we talk about Canada, Latin America, and Europe. And for the rest of the week, enjoy some of the finest analysis the industry has to offer. Hi, Zeno. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Morning, Tim. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. Excited to talk about BetWarrior and Latin America. To start off with, could you tell us about the brand, what kind of markets you specialize in, and how you try to stand out in the market?
Absolutely. So BetWarrior launched in May 2019. So it's our third anniversary. As you mentioned, we focus on LATAM. Having launched regulated markets in Argentina, in the province and the city of Buenos Aires this December. It's our biggest market currently, and our second kind of focus market is Brazil. And we also operate in Chile, Peru, Mexico, etc.
Hi, Paul. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. We spoke obviously at ICE London during the Huddle, and we're excited to speak to you a lot more in depth about Canada for the Kambi Sportsbook Festival here.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to do that. It's an exciting time here in Canada, so lots to talk about.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, a popular topic. To start off with, can you tell us, I guess, a brief history about Canadian sports betting, kind of regulated versus grey market, and also a bit about obviously what you guys do at the Canadian Gaming Association?
Sure. The Canadian Gaming Association, we're a national trade association representing operators and suppliers in the online casino space, payment providers, law firms, technology and game providers. So it's a wide range. We have 60 member companies as part of the association today. And we've been active on the sports betting front for me over a decade now, probably close to 12 years. Canada has had legal sports wagering for decades. It's been parlay wagering, predominantly offered through sports lottery products. So for Canadians, it was a lot of going to your local lottery retailer for many years to access having to do a 3-game minimum. So we've been having a really not the greatest product offering at the time. We had an emerging gray market of online gaming. The law in Canada has been unsettled about where does a bet occur, onshore or offshore. No one's really wanted to find out the answer to that question. So what we had is over the last almost 20 years is a growing gray market. And so Canadians are wagering billions of dollars through offshore online sports books. And so we've had that, people have had a taste of trying to find the product they want. And that's what, for us, the motivation to change the law. And the criminal code was amended in June of 2021, just sort of about a year ago now, and to permit legal single event sports wagering. And that was allowing the Canadian market operators in to do that, casino operators for sports books. And so that's leveling the playing field a bit, now creating a new market. Now we've combined that with Ontario creating a legal regulated market. And so that's why Ontario is a pretty popular place these days to talk about in Canada. But the sports wagering marketplace, it was estimated that there was about $5-6 billion in handle going offshore over the years. It wasn't abating, it was growing. And so that's part of the motivation. We wanted to get the law changed to start to see some of the benefits here stay in Canada. So we're thrilled it was done. We're off, and now Canadians are having a lot more choice. It's been great for consumers.
Hi, Christian. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, excited to talk to LeoVegas. Looking forward to speaking to you about sports betting. Obviously, very well known in the online casino world, LeoVegas. But can you tell us more about the company's sportsbook offering and the kind of markets you operate in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you mentioned, LeoVegas is probably most known as a casino brand, and that's how it's all started 10 years ago, casino only. We plugged in Sportsbook 2016, just in time for the Euros back then. And a couple of years later, we did some acquisitions of a couple of brands that were mainly UK facing. So BetUK and 21.co.uk is two more brands in the group that has a sportsbook. We also acquired a brand called Royal Panda, who has a sportsbook as well. And last year, we acquired the Expect brand that is operating in Sweden and Finland, also with a sportsbook. Over the years, we have consolidated all these 5 brands into the Kambi platform. Our logic for doing that was to, I think, increase efficiency and the scalability internally, making our internal processes and work a lot more efficient. We were used to run on separate sportsbook platforms, but now after consolidating, things are working more smoother, I would say. We are currently operating in a number of different regulated markets, mainly in Europe. Our biggest market is Sweden, and we're also in UK, Spain, Italy, Denmark, Germany. We're also in Ontario, and also in the rest of Canada. And then, yeah, we're in a bunch of other sort of MGA markets, mainly in Europe then. So that's how it's looking today for us when it comes to sports.
So right now, as you mentioned, with the Ontario market being fresh and single event sports betting being quite young, what are the main focuses in Canada, and what are the kind of brands and offerings that are standing out at the moment?
Well, the exciting part, Ontario's marketplace opened April 4th. On that day, there was 12, 14 operators with about 17 sites. We're now into the mid-20s, probably on our way to closer to 40 or over 40 operators in the marketplace. So the consumers have had great choice. And so what we've seen is as I mentioned earlier, with Canadians having access to the gray market, as we called it, and offshore sportsbooks, brands like LeoVegas, Unibet, Bet365, have all had and Betway have all had good customer bases here in Canada to begin with. So it's a little different than what you've seen in the United States in the sense of, is it a complete greenfield, fresh, open market? No. There's a strong customer base already built for some operators. For others, it is brand new. And so when you see Mohegans coming with a mobile offering through Fallsview Casino, thanks to Kambi, there's been lots of great choices now for consumers. The major brands are entering the marketplace, and customers are getting lots of choice, and it's going to be an exciting time for them as the product really is now being able to compete and look at what the offerings are, and customers are there's been strong downloads. There's been lots of a couple local operators like North Star Bets, which is on the Kambi platform and partner, and the Score, giving a Canadian flavor for Canadian operators, has been a really good opportunity for those companies to get and build their business here in Ontario. So anyway, it's an exciting time. I mean, I've been thrilled to watch it occur. It's gone very, very, very smoothly to this point in time. So we're thrilled. And a competitive marketplace, as I said, we'll keep saying, it's great for consumers. The consumers are going to have a great time.
Yeah, it must be quite a paradox, really, in terms of the regulated market, given the fact that you didn't even have single event sports betting before, and it was kind of parlays and accumulators, that kind of thing. And as you say now, that the choice and the kind of multiple offerings that you do have.
Yeah, it has been. I think that it's opening up also an opportunity, and there's still lots of room for growth in the Ontario marketplace. I think there was the more, call it, committed sports bettor that was in the marketplace, had apps, and was down and working and placing bets. But there's a brand new sort of wide open space for lots of new sports bettors to learn. That's one of the challenges I think the company's had. Ease of use. Those are the kinds of things that I think people are going to, because sports betting can be complicated, and we know that, and a lot of numbers and people are not quite understanding lines and the rest. And I think that's part of the need for operators to look at, how do I attract a new customer? How do I attract a player that's going to stick with me who's a sports fan? I've often said, sports bettors don't often consider themselves gamblers in many ways. They're sports fans. I bet on sports. That's all I do. I don't go to casinos. I don't do. So I think there's a lot of sports fans in Canada, and so I think that's going to be the exciting part as Ontario begins to offerings come out. It's been lots of great chatter, lots of excitement, and you know what? I think we've had, obviously with NHL playoffs ongoing in Canada, hockey's pretty popular, but NFL football is still, everybody's looking forward to football season because it's still an extremely popular product in Canada for NFL football betting. So there's lots of good things coming. I think a lot of unique products people will see, and because the Ontario market left everything open, so esports is in, everything's there. So there's not really no exclusions, live in-game, everything's available, which is very important. It was important for us as an industry to make sure that they didn't leave any exclusions and put everything in, because we wanted to make sure the customers had a wide array of choice and availability for all the products available.
So for LeoVegas now, what are your main focuses? Obviously, it's a World Cup year, and how big is sportsbook and the sports betting offering for a company that is predominantly kind of online casino is the main vertical?
Yeah, I mean, historically, sportsbook has been around 10% of the group's GGR. So I mean, yes, casino is a lot bigger right now, but we are also focusing a lot on the sportsbook vertical because we want to diversify our the revenue streams across the different verticals, basically.
Yeah.
So right now, I mean, I think LeoVegas is always, that is our biggest brand when it comes to, well, any vertical really, including sports. But it is very much a casino-oriented brand. What we want to do right now is to create something sports-led within the group. So that was one of the main reasons why we acquired the Expect brand last year. Like, we have big plans to enter more markets with Expect. It's currently only in Sweden and Finland, and make it a really, really great sports-led brand. I mean, what LeoVegas is a casino, we want to make Expect the same thing for sports. So that is what we're focusing a lot on right now. To really get that brand going. And I mean, the first year after the acquisition has been great. The growth has been exceptional, but we want to go into more markets with Expect. And also, of course, improve the products. We believe a lot in a personalized approach, creating a personalized user experience to make it always as relevant as possible. And that goes in how we present, the product and all the sports, etc., but also in our communication with players. I mean, in our CRM communication, we try to personalize that as much as possible. And I think we are just at the very early phases of that journey, and we're focusing a lot on that moving forward, because we think that that's one way of over time increasing the length of our relationship with our players, which is a key focus point for any operator right now to really drive and improve the retention rate. So that is something we're focusing a lot on. As you mentioned, this year is a World Cup year, and as always, when there are these big tournaments, it's super important for us, mainly as an acquisition driver to really bring in new players. We're super excited to see how this World Cup will differ from the ones we have experienced in the past. Normally, when you have a big tournament, it ends in mid-July, when it's like nothing else going on after that. So you have the final, and then it's like 1 month of nothing before the big leagues start again. Whereas this year, obviously, it ends in December, and I mean, the leagues are back in full swing after a week or so after the final. So we are excited to see what that can do to the retention of all the World Cup new players that we expect to bring in. So I mean, we are really excited about it, and a lot of our core markets participate in it. So yeah, it's important for us, and it's something we're already have planned for a while, actually.
You mentioned the 10% figure in terms of traditionally sportsbook. And it sounds certainly like you're definitely trying to grow that number. What kind of percentage do you think sportsbook could end up taking of the whole company's percentage of revenue, given your expectations for expect? Didn't mean any kind of wordplay there. Potentially, could it be a 50-50 split, or is that maybe a little bit too ambitious?
I mean, you never know, right? I mean, we believe a lot in the possibilities with sports, and I mean, there is a lot for us to improve on when it comes to sport. We need to be humble and say that, but there is also a big opportunity for us. There is a lot of market share for us to grab there. So for us, it's not. I mean, it's not so relevant to mention a specific figure, a specific share. We want to increase our sports presence, and of course, we want to maintain our position as a leader within the casino space as well. So we want to do both things at the same time, basically. So it's more about ramping up the sportsbook thing and do that in parallel, just as well as we have done casino historically, I would say.
Looking at sports betting in 2022 now, you mentioned the Buenos Aires market. We have a World Cup coming up, a lot of potential in Brazil and Argentina, again, two key markets you mentioned. What are the biggest kind of focuses for you as a CEO of a sports betting operator right now in 2022?
Great question, Tim. As you mentioned, we have a World Cup year ahead of us, and in our two biggest markets, Argentina and Brazil, everyone is already extremely excited around the World Cup. Our team is located in Argentina, and the Argentinians are extremely bullish about this year's World Cup. And from my perspective as CEO of the company, the most important thing is to make sure that we are ready in time to make sure that we capture the maximum out of this great possibility in terms of acquisition, in terms of branding as well. As I mentioned, we launched three years ago, so we are already busy producing content and making sure that everything is in place in time for the World Cup. We're also busy working on the platform and the sports betting product, and we're looking forward towards a great World Cup in Qatar.
Is this World Cup the biggest acquisition opportunity for you as a brand since the big launch?
It's definitely the biggest acquisition opportunity, especially since we launched the Argentinian licenses recently.
And one last question on the World Cup. I mean, do you fancy Argentina's chances? I guess it's Messi's last big chance on the on the world stage.
Yeah, it's always difficult to say, but I'm sure they'll give it everything they have, and at least for now, I'd say things are looking pretty good for them.
So as sports betting in Europe progresses, what kind of innovations or developments do you think we might see in the next few years?
I think it's going to be more of the same as we have experienced the last couple of years. I mean, everyone expects esports to grow. I mean, we do so as well. And then, I mean, the way people are consuming sports these days. I mean, it's all about like the attention span gets shorter and shorter, and that's what players it's expecting now when they enter a sportsbook to bet, they expect the site to be fast. They expect to find the markets quick. They expect to be able to place their bet quicks and get their payout quickly and so on. So I think that trend will continue, and also how the younger generation, they're more into the big names. If you take football as an example, they follow Pogba or Messi or Ronaldo, those types of players, rather than the teams, which might have been the case historically. So all those stats-based market, player props, etc., that have started to emerge the last couple of years, I think that trend is just going to continue more and more, and players are going to expect to be able to bet on anything player related in across different sports, really. So that's one trend that will continue for sure. Mm-hmm. On the more sort of boring side, if you like, we also expect the trend of tougher regulations to continue. More and more markets regulate, and also more and more markets make the existing regulation a bit tougher towards operators. So we expect that trend to continue as well, and especially around sort of bonusing and incentives like that. That is going to be more and more rules around how you incentivize players, which means that us operators need to move away from the strategy that might have been there historically of screaming loudest about the highest bonus to actually having a really strong product that players like and want to come back to. And if that's going to be the case, that's something we welcome, because we always pride ourselves in having the best possible product in all aspects around the iGaming experience. So that's a trend that we expect will continue.
Mm-hmm. A couple of follow-ups on those topics, because you mentioned kind of two key trends. On the first one, do you see a time when, I guess, player markets such as goal scorers, and as you mentioned, kind of stats, maybe shots on target has been quite popular kind of the last couple of years. Do you think we'll get to a period when those markets will in every kind of stretch be more popular than the teams markets?
I don't think we will reach that level anytime soon. The gap is just too big. But I think they will grow in popularity, and more players will find them, especially as our customer base is going to be more and more consisting of this younger generation that has grown up in this area. Yeah, I think the first time we really realized this was probably when Cristiano Ronaldo moved from Real Madrid to Juventus, and the turnover on the Juventus matches skyrocketed amongst all our countries, because he's a big personality and a good player that a lot of people follow and so on. So I think that's when we sort of realized, there's probably something in this, and we expect that to continue, really, and potentially into other sports as well. Now it's a lot of it's very football oriented, our discussion right now and the market so far, but we expect that to come to other sports as well.
Yeah, very interesting, definitely, in terms of the Ronaldo Juventus example. And my other follow-up was going to be, obviously, you mentioned regulations and bonusing and marketing. Is that eventually going to seriously discourage, I guess, newer, smaller players in the market?
It might. I think we have already seen that to a certain extent, and some of the M&As we've seen in the space recently is probably driven partly by that, and smaller operators have a harder time keeping up with all the regulations and all the changes in regulations that happens as well. So I think right now it was probably easier to start a new sportsbook 10 years ago than it is today, and I think that's going to scare off some people. There is also, apart from the regulation, there is also the increased costs in data and live streaming and those types of things that you may need to sort of have a good product. And that's, I would say, also adds to the box of what's scary together with the regulation. So I think, yeah, unfortunately, right now it will scare off some people. I would say from starting from scratch, I would say.
As sports betting in Latin America progresses, what kind of changes and perhaps innovations, developments do you see coming over the next few years?
Great question. I think the biggest change and development we're going to see in LATAM is regulation. As you know, everyone is counting the days for Brazil to regulate. It's the biggest market in LATAM, obviously, and we're pretty sure that once Brazil regulates, a lot of other markets are going to regulate as well. Looking at LATAM as a region, I'd say the big challenge as an operator, and that might go hand in hand with changes as well, is it's new markets, right? So you're confronting a lot of people with a product category they haven't seen before. So you need to do a lot of education around sports betting, around how the product works, what the different bet types are, et cetera. And in order to do that well, you need to do a lot of work around the core product, basically.
There's a lot of discussion about the potential of Brazil. As you mentioned, it's the biggest market in Latin America. It's difficult to say, obviously, without a crystal ball, looking into the future. But on a global scale, how do you think Brazil can compare to key markets around the world?
Good question. I'd say it'll take more time than people think for Brazil to realize its potential. As I said before, it's a new product category for a lot of people in the market. Yes, everyone cares deeply about football in Brazil. Other indicators for a market are point in the right direction as well. Mobile penetration is extremely high, et cetera. But it'll take some more time than people might think in order, for the market to realize its full potential. Brazil certainly has its peculiarities. At least for now, payments is an issue, as in a lot of non-regulated markets. Probably that'll improve once the market regulates. But definitely in terms of market size, in terms of interest, for football and other sports, as well as in a way entertainment, media consumption, all the right signs are there for Brazil to be one of the most exciting sports betting markets in the next 5 years.
And you mentioned new markets that may follow when Brazil regulates, and maybe follow the example if it gets certain things right. Hopefully it gets more right than it gets wrong in terms of regulation. In terms of the other markets, are there any in particular that BetWarrior and yourself have your eye on, perhaps?
Yeah, I'd say the other non-regulated Latin markets we're currently operating in. It's a very big opportunity, in a way, also from a more operations perspective. Besides Brazil, a lot of people that speak Spanish in the region. One of the things all those countries have in common is a shared passion for especially football. And there's hundreds of millions of people in the region, so there is a lot of potential out there.
So naturally, as we've already discussed, single event sports betting and Ontario are very young markets. So that really leaves it, I guess, ripe for change in the next few years, if we were to talk about how things are going to grow and develop. What do you see potentially changing over the next few years? And obviously for markets so kind of young, a regulated market so young, how does that affect the way operators can market to their players as well?
That's right. So one of the things Ontario worked on quite diligently was being able to provide a pretty much a seamless transition for those in the gray market to enter the legal regulated market. So no one had to leave, no one had to stop. There was an issue of you had to re-KYC your customer, you had to cancel future bets and move everybody to your compliant platform. But by and large, there was no bad actor clauses. Everybody was welcome. And so that transition is happening and ongoing as long as operators filed applications before the 4th. Some new changes for them. So we've got one outstanding issue around liquidity. Ontario players have been used to international liquidity. We don't have that right now. But there's a legal question that's still being determined. It's an unsettled question. So we hope to have a more I think a lot of people want to see international liquidity available in Ontario, so we hope we can get there. On advertising, one thing that's been really unique is that, especially from North American perspective, no mass market advertising of bonuses and incentives. And so that's taken that away, not through affiliates, not through social media influencers. You can't do it. They can offer them. They just have to, player has to come to your site to find them. And so that's really the one big change that takes it out of. And what we've seen is that the level of offers, while they're competitive, they're not nearly at the levels that we've seen in the United States, and that's fine. And operators are actually quite pleased with some of this, and they can compete on product and customer service. They're looking forward to that. So, and then they have the opportunity to work with those who have registered and opened accounts. They're the customers. They can make them offers and incentives through that process once they've engaged them. So it's a big, a minor flip, something that some people are not used to, but I think it's still extremely effective for the marketplaces. As it is new, it's broad. There's lots of operators coming to the market. I think the regulator and the government wanted to make sure there was measured approach to offering gaming. We have strong RG, both standards in the regulatory framework and also in the contract, the operating contract that operators must sign with iGaming Ontario. So, there's a lot of, because Canada's really had that commitment to RG for decades, and we're some of the world leaders in some of the programs and others we offered, and companies are bringing their expertise that they have. So, we have a really strong model, a strong framework in which to work from. And I think that, what we're seeing in the early days is that it's been actually a pretty seamless transition. The Canadian banks from payment process, there's been a few bumps, but nothing severe. Transaction approval rates are probably well over 90% still. So really minor stuff that we've been able to create a regulatory regime that's been inviting. There's a 20% rev share in Ontario with operators and government. And we've seen through the level of interest and the number of operators entered and soon to be entering the marketplace. We know it's been popular.
Is it fair to say that's maybe night and day with the New York mobile market at the moment? With I guess you've got perhaps less choice, but certainly mass marketing, real big bonuses.
It is. I think that between the bonus and the tax rate, I think in New York is causing some issues. And let's just be frank. I'm not getting into specifics, but Ontario looked at it from the fact that Ontarians in the gray market continues in the rest of Canada, that they've had access and customers had access. And one of the government's first principles when they got into deciding they were going to head down this path and regulate iGaming was they didn't want to interrupt the customer experience in some ways. They didn't want to put a government agency between them and the customer and the product. They didn't want to really try and change much of the experience that they had been having. The liquidity question is one that has changed some of the experience because DFS, for example, has been ceasing to be offered in Ontario because the pool's not big enough. Other products are affected in poker, but we hope to see if we can get liquidity back into the equation, getting some legal questions cleared up. But by and large, the government looked at this from that perspective. And I think the regulatory touch, people would be more familiar with. It looks more like a European regulated marketplace than it does a United States regulated market. Because they went out and learned. They talked to operators and asked them what they would like to see. They talked to regulators around the world because they recognized that, hey, they were kind of last man in, if you wanted to look at it that way. There's a lot of regulated markets around the world who didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but wanted to get an idea of what are best practices. And so that's what we've seen. And it's learning. There's early days. They've got a very open mind about how they want to approach the market. There's a lot of the compliance requirements are falling to operators to ensure that their suppliers are meeting the standards, not doing business with black market operators in Ontario. So there's lots of the onus to shift is really on the operator on their compliance side. But it's been well received by and large, and I think they're going to see what works and what doesn't work in the months ahead. I think that's important, and their willingness to say, we can make changes. They've told, the industry, we see our regulatory standards as a living document. We may want to make changes, and we're going to come to the industry and talk about those. You guys may want changes. You can come to talk to us. That's a great productive relationship to start with, and I think that's why we've been successful.
So, Zeno, if we were to look ahead to a rough figure, maybe in 5 years' time, how different will sports betting look in Latin America? And in terms of the core offering, do you see a lot of change, a lot of innovation, or is sports betting, is the very fundamental offering always going to remain relatively similar?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Tim. Let me see where to start. Let's start with the core product functionality. I think this is something that will not change a lot over the next couple of years. I think even if looking back at the last couple of years and seeing how sports betting has changed, I think we're in a period of evolution. So we're not going to see big steps and radical changes in the product. Personally, I think the biggest change the industry has seen was the launch of live betting. Everything that we've seen since then is actually improving something that was already out there. So definitely we'll see more live betting. I personally hope to see more ideas around how to make sports betting more accessible to, in a way, non-experts, right? So with the depth of markets and the depth of sports betting opportunities, I think there's a lot of people out there that are actually overwhelmed by the products that we provide. That's definitely an issue in LATAM. Now going back to the markets, I'd say the challenge for us in LATAM is going to be how to provide a engaging sports betting experience for beginners and recreational punters. And in European markets, a lot of the behavior has been learned over years and years, and most people don't really mind if you present them what is more or less an Excel spreadsheet still today. I think that's going to be, or at least we as a company are going to try and do things differently going forward. We're building a lot of product around the core betting experience. We think you need to do more in order to engage a changing audience, and I think this is also important, right? People's behaviors and preferences change, and you need to do a lot of work in order to capture those changes and those opportunities going forward.
As you say, in play, I guess the biggest, a bit cliche, but the biggest game changer out there in the last few years. But I'm not sure if you agree, perhaps things like cash out and maybe bet builders, to your point, they're building very much on an existing product, but they're kind of the little tweaks that have changed things as well. From your analysis, I guess user experience is maybe the biggest thing that needs to change and could change in the next few years.
Absolutely. It's all about user experience. The products or the sports betting experience as such is getting more and more commoditized, right? So I think a couple of years ago, you'd see big differences in terms of markets offered, in terms of live events offered, and so on. I think we're in a world now where brand preference is important. If you look at the core product, a lot of companies out there offer more or less the same product as such. So you need to work really hard on the user experience inside of sports betting or inside the sports betting product, but also in the other core areas of the product, in payments, in the onboarding flow. Extremely important, especially in regulated markets. If you look at a market like Argentina, certainly the city of Buenos Aires, for example, has a very demanding onboarding process, and there are a lot of things you can do wrong, and that's always a big opportunity to do things better than our competition.
So, Christian, given everything we've discussed so far, in 5 years' time, are we going to see a European sports betting market and offering that's tremendously different with a lot of innovation and a lot of new markets? Or are we actually going to be looking at something that's going to be relatively stable as it was sort of 10, 20 years ago, the core offering relatively the same?
I would say relatively the same if we're talking about the five-year period. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I think everyone is expecting esports to grow. I mean, during the first wave of the pandemic, table tennis emerged as a really new live betting sport like that. So those things can always happen, and you can have external factors helping the growth of certain sports. But I don't think that in 5 years' time we will look at a completely new offering and a completely new landscape compared to what we have today. I think a lot of the development will come within sort of the player-focused markets, and will be around product innovation outside of the sportsbook vertical per se. I think players will expect to have seamless way of logging in, depositing, withdrawing, etc., submitting documents, like all those things that can be pain points for players today. I think if you look at sort of companies from other industries, they are sometimes a lot better than our industry when it comes to things like signing up, etc. So I think the users will expect our industry to be on the same level as everyone else when it comes to those things. So I think a lot of the innovation will be driven around this sort of the things that supports the sportsbook experience. One thing that I'm a bit excited, or that will be interesting to follow, is sort of new types of operators that is emerging. I mean, we saw the other month about DAZN launching the sportsbook. So I think we might see some new type of operators in that way that is gonna affect sort of the overall betting landscape a little bit, and see how that impacts competition between operators. But I don't think that the core sportsbook experience will be that much different in 5 years.
So a final question for you, Paul, from me is in 5 years' time, 5 being an arbitrary figure, basically in a few years down the line, how different will the Canadian sports betting market, the regulated one, be? And I anticipate, compared to our other focus regions of Europe and Latin America, I anticipate Canada may see a lot more change and a lot more development as it's so kind of early in the growth stage.
Yeah, it is very early in the growth stage. And I think what we've seen, what we hope to see is, while Ontario is open with an open regulated license marketplace in Ontario, for operators, we want to see other provinces. We want to see the end of the gray market in Canada. As an industry, we want to see regulated marketplaces. And what those look like, we hope that they, will look at Ontario, look at the success we've had so far. Hopefully that continues. I suspect it will. That they look at it from a customer experience, a customer's desire to have choice of product, but also making sure that those consumer protections are in place. There's a level playing field for operators across the country. We want all of that. So both the domestic operators, those from offshore, whoever wants to come and play in the marketplaces, can and are able to. So we think that hopefully within the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see most of Canada will have become regulated marketplaces. That's my hope. And I think we're going to see a very sophisticated market. I think a lot of diversity in the market. Canada, there's a lot of what people often refer to as the long tail offerings. I think will provide some uniqueness to the market beyond the NFL, NHL, NBA, but cricket, soccer, football, rugby, curling has become a product that's being offered here. So there's lots of choices, and I think that will be provide some of the uniqueness of the Canadian marketplace. So you know what, it's exciting times ahead, and I think will be a very productive 5 years for the industry in the next as we look forward. So exciting times.
And there we have it, a great note to end on. Thank you, Paul, for your time and your answers. Thank you also to Zeno, and thank you also to Christian. We'll be handing over the reins to another Christian soon as Kambi's Festival Sportsbook continues with CEO Christian Nyland and CCO Cecilia Wachtmeister. From me and Gambling Insider, thanks very much for watching and enjoy the rest of the week's content.